Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name's Elaine Bergstrom. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this program and my personal experience about being a type 1 diabetes with our special guest, Stacy Selowowski. And she is a functional nutritionist, registered dietitian. I'm also very grateful for Hadassah and JCA for allowing us this opportunity today to learn from her, she's an expert, and she's going to explain the root cause of each type of diabetes, type 1 or type 2, and teach us how to use food as medicine to help us achieve optimal health. I just want to share a little bit about Hadassah's role in health and thank Hadassah and the JCA and welcome Hadassah members as well as JCA with us today. For those of you who may not know, Hadassah is the Women's Zionist Organization. It was founded in 1912 and was initially established to provide emergency care to infants and mothers in pre-state Israel. Today, it has flourished into 2 world-class medical and research centers in Jerusalem, Hadassah Hospital at Ein Kerem and Mount Scopus in the West Jerusalem. Hadassah also runs schools of medicine, dentistry, nursing, and pharmacology affiliated with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, bringing advanced medical care to all, regardless of race, ethnicity, or nationality, earned Hadassah a nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. Hadassah has played a historic role in helping to prevent diabetes and to improve the lives of those suffering from this chronic disease, and is fighting the disease through education, research, and a team approach to utilizing current knowledge and technologies. At this time, I just want to share a little bit about Stacy, and then we'll get started with our program. So Stacy is a functional nutrition registered dietitian. She became a dietitian in New York City over 20 years ago and has been building her practice here in Jacksonville for about 5 years. I'd like to welcome Stacy and ask her to describe what is functional nutrition. Take it away, Stacy.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. And hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and have this opportunity to talk to you on this really important and I think very valuable topic. So yeah, functional medicine, or functional nutrition, I like to say, because I'm a dietitian. The idea behind this is that we are looking for the root cause for imbalance. So rather than, taking a Tylenol to treat a symptom of a headache, we actually look for why are you having that headache and what can we do to make sure that we address that root cause so that your body doesn't continue to have these signs and symptoms of inflammation or these continued discomforts. So we're looking for the root cause. We are looking to prevent the onset of chronic conditions rather than just treat them once they're there. And we are always aiming to achieve optimal health. So not just, well, we're okay because we're not sick, but really what can make us the most healthy that we could be. We also look at the entire body as a whole entity, and that each system, everything is connected. Whereas in conventional medicine, you go to a doctor for the GI, or you go to the doctor for the endocrinology, and you go sort of to doctors for different systems in the body. We really look at how are all of these systems connected. So it's root cause root cause of imbalance. We're treating the entire body. We're seeking seeking optimal health. And so that's really what functional medicine is, and functional nutrition. We're using food and lifestyle as medicine rather than pharmaceutical agents. Does that make sense to you?
That's great. So can you describe the signs or symptoms of inflammation?
Yes, that's such a good question, because we use the word inflammation all the time, and I never know if that's something that everybody understands. So inflammation is a really healthy process that our bodies could not live without. So we absolutely have to have an inflammatory response so that we can protect our bodies from any type of exposure to a germ or a virus, so that we can protect our bodies when we get injured. Also, it's a form of protection when we breathe in something that is a pollutant, or when we eat something that is toxic to our body. So this is a process where our body will send out immune cells to either grab onto that germ or virus, or to heal that injury, or to remove a pollutant. It's a very healthy defensive mechanism that our body uses to keep us strong and healthy. The problem of inflammation comes in when it's happening inappropriately. So let's say we're having this inflammatory response to eating a piece of bread or drinking some milk. We don't want inflammation to happen when we're doing ordinary things that should be safe. They're not true threats, and there shouldn't be an inflammatory response. So that's when inflammation becomes a little bit problematic. The other time it's problematic is when it lingers, when it's not powerful enough to get rid of that injury, to get rid of that germ and be done with it. And instead, it's sort of just this ongoing thing where your body is constantly working to remove something, but it's never it's never completely done. So those type of people will experience things like constant mucus. If you're the type of person who wakes up every single day with a runny nose or going like having to clear their throat, that means that it is a sign that your body is having sort of this lingering inflammation. And you asked in particular, what are some signs and symptoms of inflammation? So some really obvious signs are when we hurt ourselves, right? We get like a bump, we get redness, we get swelling. If we have a fever, heat. Those are all clear signs of inflammation. It's a clear sign that your body is trying to get rid of something, is trying to heal you from a virus or heal this injury that you experienced. Those are very clear signs of inflammation. But some other signs that we don't often recognize or understand are things like headaches or joint pain or indigestion or mood instability. So things that we sort of just live with and we don't really understand why they're happening, those are all signs that the body is reacting to something. We don't maybe know what it is right away, but it's very important that we pay attention to these signs and symptoms, because we need to understand the root cause. We need to understand why. Is there a nutrient deficiency? Is there some type of viral load, bacterial load in our gut? Is there something going on that is causing this sign or symptom? So it's so important to listen to our body. That is our best defense, to figure out why is our body showing us these signs and how can we address them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So how is inflammation related to autoimmunity?
Yes, another term that we hear so much, autoimmunity. What do these words mean? So we kind of discussed what inflammation is. It's this form of protection, but that sometimes goes overboard, right? When inflammation goes overboard, when I told you when we have this inappropriate inflammation, let's say to certain things that we're eating, or when it lingers, when inflammation lingers too long, sometimes our body makes this mistake and it starts to think that some of our own cells are the problem. So all of a sudden, our body will start attacking our thyroid, possibly, and that's why people have Hashimoto's or Graves' disease. It could start thinking that your pancreatic cells are the problem, and it will start attacking the pancreatic cells, which is the cell that is responsible for making insulin. So we'll get into that and why this is related to diabetes. Sometimes inflammation lingering will cause a reaction to your skin, and that's why people have things like psoriasis. So all of these are different autoimmune conditions, and it really is just inflammation being exaggerated and inflammation attacking your own body cells, and then you end up with this type of autoimmune condition.
Great. So is diabetes associated with autoimmunity and or inflammation?
Yes. So and this is where I kind of wish the language was different. I really do wish that type 1 and type 2 were called different things entirely, because they are quite different. They do have something to do with insulin, so that's their commonality. But besides that, the root cause of each of these conditions is very different. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. So it is where your own body cells during inflammation attack your pancreatic cells, and your pancreatic cells lose the ability to make insulin. So at that point, this often happens at a younger age, although there are definitely people who are starting to get it at older ages as well. And it's where your body stops having the ability to make insulin. And I really want to give you the floor in 1 second, but I do want to explain what is insulin and what it does. Insulin is the hormone responsible for taking sugar and carbohydrates from your food and moving it into your cells so that those cells could use carbohydrate as energy and as fuel. If you don't have insulin, then that sugar that you're eating and those carbohydrates end up in your blood, and it can't get into your cells. And high blood sugar can be quite dangerous. So this is the root cause of type 1 diabetes, this autoimmune condition. And I'm going to talk about type 2. But please, Elaine, can you share with us your experience with type 1? When were you diagnosed? Give our audience a little bit of information on what it's like.
Sure. Thank you for giving that explanation, because so many times there's so many misunderstandings that it's one disease. And, through the years, I've been a diabetic for over 38 years. I was diagnosed in my early 20s, which is not uncommon. It's not just small children that become type 1 diabetics. And there are even adults, 30s, 40s, 50s, that are become type 1 diabetics. And so my journey began with a local ADA chapter, American Diabetes Association. And I got involved learning about how to care for myself and got support, which was great at the time. When I first began, it was a urine test strip. I know we still use those. And then I started on one injection, and then became more in control by taking 4 injections. We call that the poor man's pump. And it wasn't that my diabetes was worse, which is always a misconception. It was that I could manipulate and get blood sugar control much quicker. I wound up having 3 healthy sons. They were all huge babies. And at the time, I was living in Chicago and went to special clinics for high-risk patients. And through that period, my insulin increased so much because of the babies. They were all really big babies. My middle one was 11.2, and I probably should have had like 6-7 pound babies. But what I did find out at that point was because I was so involved in the association, I did fundraising and help support groups and help people with their challenges. I went to several conventions and wound up being asked to be one of the first lay people on the American Diabetes Board in Chicago, which was really a privilege. But at that time, it was kind of above my head. All I did was local fundraising and try and help the organization. But after my second son was born, I went to a convention and saw an insulin pump for the first time. And that's a pump that stores your insulin, and by pushing buttons, you're not really taking injections, it's going through a tube. And it was very creative. It was state of the art at the time. And I knew I could throw the pump in my bathing suit and swim with my small children.
Wow.
So that was like very exciting at the time. And so I decided to go on an insulin pump and have been on a pump for 29 years. And of course, all of the technology has changed. I'm currently on a pump that you would call a closed loop system, which actually can control or suggest sometimes that it changes your blood sugar. So it was a little scary at first, but overall, I try and keep my health as good as I can. I take my blood sugars when I have to. A new piece, which I've recently gone on, is a Dexcom G6, and I'm just so happy because I don't have to finger test all day.
Oh,
so
great.
I'm really going to become an advocate for these new products. But the journey is not always easy. It becomes a second job, and we have to take care of ourselves a lot of the time. But sometimes these tools that are out for us can help us alleviate some of the work that we need to do. But there's hope for us. We can lead healthy lives. I do have complications in my eyes and get eye treatments, which are more stable now. So the goal is, if you're a type 1 or type 2, is always to try and maintain your blood sugars as normal as possible. And put yourself first is what I would say. Always take care of yourself. Eat as healthy as you can. Join a diabetes sisters support group. Sorry if you're a man out there. And we do have a local groups in Jacksonville and Jacks Beach. And if you're interested, please contact me. And hi to my diabetes sisters who I know are joining the program. But support is very helpful. And, take ownership is what I would suggest of your diabetes. Ask questions. Doctors can help us, but we also have to be advocates for ourselves, or we need people like Stacy to really support us and guide us. It's a team effort, and you don't have to feel alone. And I want to put in a little plug that I found out when I moved to Jacks Beach and joined my Diabetes Sisters group. I met another sister who was showing a medallion, and Lilly, which is an insulin company and a pharmaceutical company, supports diabetics, and I'm no longer on their product, but I'm very proud of them. And if you've had diabetes for X amount of years, I was over 25 at the time, they send you a beautiful necklace medallion to support you. And I'm so glad Stacy's here to explain the importance of food, because for so many years, you know, I was told I couldn't eat this, I couldn't eat that. And it was more about my blood sugars, but not how I felt. And I think this role that she plays is very important in how we can move forward and treat our health and take care of ourselves. So I thank you for this. I'm so tired of just hearing about the basic, you know, eat this, don't eat that. And it's much more than that. So thank you for, you know, being part of this and educating us on, I want to say functional nutrition is going to be the new movement for us. I have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for listening. How can food be used as medicine to address each type of diabetes?
Yes. So, well, thank you for that. First of all, it's so nice to hear a really positive, uplifting story from somebody. You know, I often think that the day you get diagnosed with something like this is the day that you become the healthiest person you could be, because it really teaches you how important it is to prioritize your health and to do the research that you need to do to, you know, to eat the right foods and to treat your body the best you can. So sometimes this is a blessing in disguise, although it doesn't always feel that way. I think that you can become even healthier because of the information and the knowledge that you have. So, so congratulations to you. So I was sort of describing the connection between autoimmunity and type 1 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is completely different, although the connection is still insulin. Type 2 diabetes is more of a lifestyle condition. So if you can imagine the scenario of the people, how we eat in the United States, we eat the standard American diet, right? So we wake up in the morning, we have a bowl of cereal or a bagel or, you know, some bread, carbohydrate. Usually there's not a lot of times much fruit or vegetables involved at breakfast. And then at lunch, you have a sandwich with chips. Maybe you had a snack in between somewhere. Maybe you have another snack in between in the afternoon. And then at dinner, we have, you know, chicken and potatoes and maybe some vegetables, but usually probably not a lot. And then dessert. So you can hear how we're eating lots of carbohydrates. And every time we eat carbohydrates, insulin is required to take that carbohydrate and put it into your cell. Imagine you have this cell inside of your body that carbohydrates are being stuffed into it all day long. Carbohydrate, insulin is knocking on the door of that cell and saying, here's more carbohydrates, here's more carbohydrates. And so eventually that cell in your body says, we don't want any more carbohydrates. So it closes the door to insulin and it says, no, we're not going to listen to your message anymore. Even you're telling us to open the door, we're not going to listen. So basically that is what is called insulin resistance. Your cells are so full of carbohydrates that they are now resistant to the message that insulin is giving them. So you might often hear that type 2 diabetes is connected to insulin resistance. And that is where we have to treat type 2 diabetes different than type 1. Because type 1, we absolutely need to give someone like Elaine insulin. We have to give it to her because that's the only way. Her cells aren't making it anymore. But with type 2 diabetes, we can actually change around that process and we can have cells start to listen to insulin again. So we can increase insulin sensitivity. So we can make the cells more sensitive to insulin. That's the opposite of insulin resistance. So there's two very separate conditions going on here. One, you absolutely need insulin. We need to give that insulin. The other, how can we eat and live a lifestyle that's going to allow your cells to listen to the insulin that you are still making? So two separate conditions, two different ways of treating sort of these conditions. However, you asked, how could we use food in both of these conditions? And I would actually argue that we can generalize here. We can provide healthy options that are very similar in both conditions. And this would be by number one, starting with the most important recommendation that I could give is choosing whole, unprocessed foods. So the reason the standard American diet is so unhealthy for us is because we've gotten into the routine of going into the supermarket and buying foods that are in packages that we can just stick in the microwave, warm them up, and eat. It doesn't even matter if that is a potato or if it is like some sort of fried food or whatever it is, but it's processed foods. It's foods that they no longer look the way that they looked when they were picked in nature. So let's think about going shopping in the supermarket, and you think about the perimeter of the supermarket where you see all the fruits and the vegetables, and you see animals, sort of raw meat, and even in the frozen aisle, you see frozen vegetables, frozen fruits, sometimes berries, things like that. But you know that that is the way that food looked when it was picked from nature. So an apple looks exactly the same whether you took it off the tree or you buy it in the supermarket. That means that there's nothing taken out of the food from when it was picked, and there was nothing added to it. If you actually then start to go towards the center of the supermarket and you see all the foods in their packages, and you start to think, is this the way it looked in nature? Not really. There was either things taken out of it, so like white flour, lots of fiber was taken out of that, and it had to go through many processes to look like white powder that you end up using in your food. Or foods where they had to add additives and preservatives to make the food last longer on the shelf. So you start looking at those ingredient labels and you start seeing ingredients that you know there's no way that this was something that was picked from nature. Sometimes ingredients that were put together in a laboratory that were added to the food to make it have a longer shelf life or to make it taste different or the texture. So those, when your body sees an ingredient that it doesn't recognize as food, think back to what we talked about at the beginning of this lecture, or this discussion, inflammation. When your body is exposed to something that is recognized as foreign, it will cause inflammation. So just like a germ, just like a virus, just like a toxin or a pollutant in the air, a chemical or compound that was put together in a laboratory and added to our food will cause inflammation in our body because our body doesn't recognize it as food. Does that all make sense?
That was good. That was good. So what other lifestyle modifications would you recommend to reduce the inflammation and promote optimal health?
Yes. Oh, I love these questions. I'm like in heaven right now. So whole unprocessed foods, the more, and I know it's not convenient, but the more we can cook from scratch, the better off we are. Holiday eating is healthy eating because we cook from scratch. So that's number one. Number two is I really recommend, or I teach people how to construct their plate so that you're never just eating carbohydrates alone, because when we eat carbohydrates alone, we trigger that insulin response. We don't want that to happen all throughout the day. We don't want more and more insulin all the time, because that will happen, that process that I told you before, where our cells will become resistant to insulin. So instead, we want to eat carbohydrates along with some protein and along with fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables should be at every single meal. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. Quarter of your plate should be protein, and a quarter of your plate should be a high fiber carbohydrate. That is how your plate should be constructed at every meal. The other thing I recommend is, as long as you aren't experiencing hypoglycemia, so as long as you aren't the type of person who your blood sugar drops when you don't eat, then I do recommend trying not to snack. So eating your meals about 4.5 to 5 hours apart from each other, fasting for 10 to 12, maybe even 14 hours over the night, and having that amount of hours to allow your body to completely digest what you eat and even start burning some of those calories is especially healthy. The problem comes in when every time we get hungry, we eat. Every single time we feel even the tiniest bit hungry, we get something to eat. Because that's going to that same process that I talked about before, is your cells are going to be resistant to the insulin at some point. Your food we don't have to be eating every single time we feel a little hungry. It's more beneficial for us to get through that time period and wait to the next meal, so that we don't get that insulin trigger. We allow calories to get burned, and we allowed food to get completely digested. So those are some of my big sort of nutrition related recommendations, but I do have, you asked for lifestyle recommendations. So I do have some good lifestyle recommendations. I cannot emphasize this enough. The same inflammation that I talked about before, where your body sends out immune cells to get rid of a germ, sends out immune cells to clear a injury, those same immune cells get sent out when we are stressed. Stress is a huge part of this picture. I'm not saying we can control the stress that we are constantly being faced with, especially over the past year. There has been lots of stress from every single possible outlet, right? But what we can do is give ourselves moments during the day where we clear our mind. So whether that is meditation, yoga, going into the bathroom and breathing by yourself, it is so important that we clear the inflammation that stress causes. Because like I said, it doesn't matter the source of inflammation. It could be a food, it could be a nutrient deficiency, it could be a virus, it could be an injury, or it could be stress. Or it could be not enough sleep. Sleep is when inflammation gets reduced. So that's another one. Sleep, lowering your stress, finding ways to manage your stress or have time in the day to clear your head. Those are all super important. Sleep, managing stress, and then finally, moving. Moving. I don't even like to use the word exercise because already people don't want to hear about exercise. But when I just say move more, it sounds a lot more approachable and accessible. And that's all I mean. You don't have to be running a marathon. You don't have to be on an exercise bike sweating your butt off. You can just take a walk. You can stand up and stretch. You can look on your YouTube and search for stretching extra videos or things that are just within your grasp and something that you will continue ongoing. If you're going to push yourself so hard a couple of days in a row that you're going to stop and give up and never want to exercise again, then it's not the right thing for you. Find something that you are willing and able to do long term. So those are some of my really important lifestyle recommendations. Does that answer your question? Do you have any questions on what I've said or any more suggestions? I would love to hear what you think.
I just thought that was really informative. I always think I'm on top of things, but I still learned some new things, and I especially liked how important sleep is. And, food does change. It's changed over the years for me. And learning about carbohydrates, we always, early on, I just remember hearing about, no sugar, no cake, no sweets. And then I found out pasta and pizza could be worse than, a piece of cake, raising my blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So that is so good to know. And now I'm much more conscious of the carbs that I eat with each meal and, the journey. But I think it's also important too, is the healthy fats. I haven't, I think years ago, low fat diets were such a big thing, but
Yeah.
I did want to ask you if you want to share with us how you got on this functional nutrition journey, because, functional medicine is just coming out. There's some doctors now really promoting it, but I'm so interested because I think you're rare in that and can offer us so much. So if you don't mind sharing.
Thank you for that question. Yes. So as you had mentioned before, I've been a dietitian for over 20 years. I started in New York, and I quickly realized after doing that what I was counseling people wasn't enough. I was doing exactly like you had just mentioned. In that time period in the 90s, everything had to be low fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was okay. You could, if the food was like this fake cookie, Snackwell cookie or something, it didn't matter, what was in it. As long as there was no fat, you were okay. And I was teaching people that because that's what I had been taught, and it wasn't working. I had diabetic patients and they weren't able to control their blood sugar, and it was so frustrating for me. And so over time, I sort of found different things to use my nutrition knowledge for, but it wasn't, I just knew there was something missing. More recently, my husband was diagnosed with Graves' disease. So the autoimmune condition that has to do with thyroid, hyperthyroid. And again, I thought, my nutrition background is not giving me the information I need to help him. The doctors wanted to remove his thyroid and then he would be on medication forever. They had all different scenarios of ways to treat the symptom of this, but I didn't like any of them. They all sounded like not good suggestions. So I thought, I've got to figure this out. So I went back to school. I got my master's in human nutrition and functional medicine. And that opened my eyes to a whole new world of nutrition and medicine. And I really understand now the root cause for autoimmunity, for inflammation, for chronic conditions, for things that we experience that we can't understand, and we sometimes just live with, and we think it's normal to just live with these things, and it's not normal. Anything that you are experiencing that is uncomfortable over time will lead to something else and will lead to something else. And giving you a medication to treat that one symptom will also lead to you probably needing another medication and then another medication and more side effects and more side effects. And so instead of treating these symptoms one as they come, we need to understand, why did that even happen from the beginning? Sometimes it's just that you didn't have enough B vitamins or enough magnesium or some mineral or vitamin. And if we can just make sure you're getting that nutrient density and nutrient diversity so that your body has what it needs to have a healthy process, then we don't need to just treat the symptom. We can give you the food or the vitamin that you needed, and it literally can reverse this entire condition that feels so overwhelming. So thankfully, my husband's autoimmune condition has been reversed for the past 4 years, since more even longer, I think now, maybe 5 or 6 years, but his numbers are normal. We eat healthy. We did have to remove certain foods that were triggering an autoimmune response in his body, like gluten and dairy and things like that. But we're thankfully, knock on wood, we're doing really good. And that just, I mean, now all I want to do is go out and help as many people as I could. I really just want to share this information to everyone. Help your parents, help your kids, like realize that we don't have to live with these chronic conditions.
And we can feel so much better by doing these small changes. So before we open up for probably questions or comments, if somebody is just diagnosed as a diabetic or just starting their journey, are there a couple of things that you would suggest them to, besides getting good support? I would recommend contacting you, but what would you say so they're not overwhelmed that they could, start with?
So for type 1 diabetes, I would recommend that to realize that this is something that you can live such a healthy life with. That there's, especially nowadays, like you mentioned, there are so many tools to help you control your blood sugar throughout the day by using insulin, measuring your blood sugar, understanding what is going on. This is something that, that I really believe will make a person healthier, because it will force them to be in charge of their body and paying attention and learning and doing research and learning, how to be healthy. The other part to an autoimmune condition that I would just to keep in mind is remember that there is a trigger. There is something that is causing your body to react, and it could be gluten, it could be dairy, it could be, some type of stress or a traumatic event or something that caused inflammation to begin with, and it went on a little too long, and then your body started to attack your own cells. So going back to that whole root cause thought process that I mentioned at the beginning, try to think of what that root cause, what caused that initial inflammation. Because if you continue, let's say it is gluten, let's say it is dairy, and if you continue to eat the food or do the, be involved with the stress or the whatever trigger that was, if that continues, even though you're controlling your blood sugar with insulin, you might be at risk for another autoimmune condition. So now you won't only attack your pancreatic cell, but now you'll also attack your joints and you'll get rheumatoid arthritis. So for type 1 diabetes, I would do some research and try to understand what was the trigger to begin with. That's really important. For type 2 diabetes, completely different. Type 2 diabetes, we just need to get you healthy. We need to give you the most healthy diet. We need to make sure you're sleeping and exercising, and just this can be completely changed and reversed if we can, just teach your body to listen to the message of insulin, to be insulin sensitive rather than insulin resistant. So 2 very different conditions, 2 ways I would handle it, but those would be my big sort of broad pieces of advice. But we do have some questions here, so let's see. Mitzi asked, I heard that eating a protein first is best so that you can handle the sugar for a carbohydrate. Do you agree? I absolutely agree that they should be eaten together. So it's not like you have to put the protein in your mouth, the 5 minutes before and then the sugar, but they should absolutely be combined. Another thing that I would say to that, and I meant to bring this up before and I forgot, so I'm glad you reminded me, Mitzi, is that it is very important to tell your body when you're eating that this is the time to rest and digest. Our body has these 2 sort of processes. One is fight or flight, and the other is rest and digest. When we are working, when we have a to-do list, when we are driving, all of these things that we could be possibly doing that people are eating along with, then you're going to stay in that fight or flight, and you are not going to allow your body to rest and digest. You're not going to allow the insulin to be sensitive. The body is going to say, we have to store all this food as fat right now because we're busy with this job we're doing, or the to-do list, or the driving, or whatever else. So it's very important that we put everything down right before we're about to eat. Maybe even take some breathing, do some breathing strategies, and tell your body, I'm going to be grateful for what I'm about to eat. I'm not saying this in a religious way, but I do think there is something to be said about praying before you eat, because you're mindful and you're telling your body to rest, digest, and have a healthy metabolism. So I know that was a different topic than the question, but I do believe protein and sugar should be eaten together. Hopefully it's not simple sugar. Hopefully it's more complex sources of sugar. So things that are in like fruits are more complex sugars versus the sugar that you find in white flour or cakes and candies and stuff like that. But eating together as a meal would be what I recommend, and telling your body to rest and digest. All right, next question from Helen. This has been so informative. You have both been great. Oh, thank you. I would like to share it with others who weren't able to make it today. Has it been? Yes, there is as soon as this is over, there will be a YouTube link that I can share. I could even make it public. So people can go on my YouTube page and see it there, along with all of my in the kitchen videos that I do for the JCA. I do a cooking video every single Sunday. It's 30 minutes long. This past weekend, I did a Thanksgiving stuffing that was vegetarian and gluten and dairy free, and probably could be kosher because there isn't any dairy in it and there's no pork or bacon or anything. So yeah, my YouTube page will have that, and I can also just give you a link to this in particular lecture.
Great, that'd be awesome.
And then, is type 1 diabetes inherited? Good question. So I could answer this in so many ways. Okay, number one, most important thing is that we are all genetic. We all have a genetic, position, right? That we can. Our genes they absolutely can be expressed more similar to something else that happened in our family, right? But the more healthy that we treat our bodies, the more that we change our diets and have less stress and exercise and all that, then no matter what was in our genes, that does not have to be expressed. So I never want to use genetics as sort of an excuse as to why we get anything. Because if we can treat our bodies in a really healthy way, and we can give all the nutrients that our body needs, then no matter what was in our family, it doesn't have to be expressed. My family, type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease is every single generation. But I am going to do what I need to do to not get these things. So that's number one. But autoimmunity is definitely something that can be genetic. If you don't live appropriately and you don't figure out some of these root causes for autoimmunity and inflammation, then yes, autoimmunity can be inherited or in the genetics, I would say. So if you have someone in your family that has an autoimmune condition, and you know that maybe you might be more susceptible to this, you might start doing some research, and certainly contact me, because I could help you to teach you what types of foods are often recognized as foreign in people that have autoimmune conditions. I can teach you about how to avoid foods that cause inflammation. But all these things that, making sure you're following all the recommendations that I mentioned about stress and sleep and anxiety, and all those things, they all play a role. And if we can just avoid the trigger for autoimmunity, then whether it was in your genetics or not, you do not have to get it. So I hope that answers that question. Ooh, I like this one. Nutrient density, yes. Okay, so I talk about these three terms all the time: nutrient density, nutrient diversity, and quality, nutrient quality. So density is where every time you put food in your mouth, you are ensuring that that bite of food is packed with nutrition. So the more densely packed it is with nutrition. What does that mean? Vitamins, minerals, healthy protein, healthy fat. Every bite, every time you eat, it's an opportunity to feed the cells in your body with the nutrients that they need to have a healthy process. Everything that we do needs nutrients. Every single thing, the energy we use, the digestion, our immunity, our mood, everything we do relies on nutrients. So if we can use every eating opportunity to feed ourselves with nutrient-dense foods, then that's great. So an opposite would be like sugar or white flour or something that doesn't have vitamins, minerals, protein, or fat. Nutrient diversity is that you're getting all the different vitamins and minerals that you need. So eating like the colors of the rainbow. So a lot of us get stuck in this routine of sort of eating the same things all the time, right? We like what we like and we eat the same thing every day. But a lot of times if we're only eating green and red foods, then we're missing a vitamin that exists in orange foods or purple foods. So it's really healthy to think about nutrient diversity and getting all the different colors, because every color represents a different vitamin or mineral. Finally, quality, and that was where I talked about before, choosing whole unprocessed foods, organic when you can, and I could get into another time talking about when to choose organic and when to not, and grass-fed and grass-finished meats and pasture-raised chickens and wild-caught fish. So those are the high-quality foods that I talk about. So nutrient density, nutrient diversity, and nutrient quality. Okay. I thought it was better to eat smaller meals. Yes, so there's so many things that we were taught in our lives that were not accurate. We were also taught that no fat was good and that everything we should eat is no fat. And yet we would eat these foods that had no fat in it, but were packed with these horrible chemicals that they put together in a laboratory. And fat is healthy for us, by the way. Same thing, we used to think that eating small meals throughout the day is a healthy thing, and it actually is not. And that's why something called intermittent fasting is becoming this new popular trend, but there is science behind that. There really is research. Everything that I teach is evidence-based. I recommend everything that I teach is from studies and science that I have deeply researched, and it's actually more healthy for you to allow your body to have several hours in between meals and just really eat your 3 meals. Some people will even skip a meal and just eat 2 meals a day when they're really getting into intermittent fasting, or they may even skip 24 hours of eating and they start taking intermittent fasting to higher and higher levels. But there is something really healthy about allowing your body to have several hours of no food. More frequently than what you suggested about 3 meals and no snacking. So everybody is different, and I want to be careful what I'm saying here, because I know there are people on here who could be experiencing hypoglycemia from diabetes. So I don't want you to tell you to skip snacking if you are experiencing low blood sugars when you go too many hours without eating. However, so for most people, I recommend 3 meals and fasting overnight. If you want to take intermittent fasting to another level because you, for some reason, and I would have to kind of know your individual circumstances. I don't like to just give general recommendations about this. But for some people, I recommend taking one day out of the week where you fast for 16 hours and you eat your meals only during 8 hours of the day. Still 3 meals, but just throughout 8 hours of the day. And then some people will take it to 24 hours. I mean, it really does depend on your scenario. But for the most part, 3 meals a day and fasting about 10 to 12 hours overnight is what I recommend. I think we have time for one more, and then we're probably going to have to close up. But my husband has type 1 diabetes for 22 years, diagnosed at age 52. How does he start the search for the root cause? I love that. Okay. So it's not an easy process and it takes some time. So one thing that you might want to think about researching is doing an elimination diet. An elimination diet is where you eliminate the 7 or 8 common food, I don't know if allergens or sensitivities, and that would include things like dairy, gluten, soy, corn, sometimes peanuts, tree nuts, sometimes shellfish. You eliminate these certain foods for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then it allows your body to become much more sensitive so that when you reintroduce just one at a time, your body will quickly react when it's a food that was causing inflammation, but you weren't able to feel it or see it. Now, all of a sudden, you will be able to feel it or see it the second you put it in your mouth. And then you know that food was a trigger. Some other things to think about is also think back to when he was first diagnosed. And the year prior, was there something that happened that year prior? Was there a traumatic event? Was there a virus like the Epstein-Barr virus? Or was he on antibiotics for a really long period of time, and that would damage the gut bacteria, and that could be a trigger for autoimmunity. So think about all the events that led up to his diagnosis and see if there might be something that rings a bell. There are many tests that you can also take even now. There are tests that can look at his viral load and see if maybe there is some type of virus still there that you don't even know about, or some bacteria dysbiosis, like an imbalance of bacteria in the gut. And then there are tests to see if your body is sending out antibodies, autoimmune, an antibody to foods. So there's different things you can do, but it is a process and there's a lot. So it does help if you, I'm more than happy to work with you. Please look for me on my contact information. I will put it up at the end, but I'd love to help you if I could. All right, do we have any time? Okay, 3 more minutes. Let's see.
You're okay. These are great, great questions and answers. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we are up to the end now. So what do you recommend for type 2 high AM fasting sugars? Yeah, so think about what you're eating the night before. So if you're, you don't want to have too many carbohydrates right before you go to sleep. You definitely want to have like 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours between dinner and going to sleep. So fasting for 2 hours and then going to sleep and not eating till the next morning is helpful. There are also some herbal supplements that I like. I like reishi mushroom powder. So reishi, R-E-I-S-H-I, reishi mushroom powder. You can take that as a supplement, or you can add it to tea, or even drink reishi tea. It's calming, and that will help you. You can have that before you go to sleep. You can also, after dinner, first thing in the morning and after dinner, you can have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a whole cup of water. So you can drink that in the morning and drink that in the night, and that will help your body digest carbohydrates better. So fasting 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep, reishi mushroom powder tea as a supplement, however you like, and having that apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon in a cup of water 2 times a day. You could even have it 3 times a day, honestly. It's good to have with a meal because it helps digest the carbohydrate. Okay, my last one says to put up my contact information. So here you go. There's my email address at the JCA. I am so happy to be working there. I will be definitely sending out the link for the YouTube video, for this YouTube video, but I will also give information about my YouTube channel so that you can see all the videos, the cooking videos that I've done, and contact me anytime. I'd love to hear from all of you. So thank you for this opportunity, Elaine. Thank you for coming on here, and you had such great questions. I really appreciate this, this chance.
Thank you. And feel free to contact me as well.
Yes.
If you can just put up that, and if you're interested in a Diabetes Sisters support group, you probably could just Google it. But if you contact me, I can connect you with, you know, a couple of groups out in the area, and they are for type 1 and type 2 diabetics, and they're just wonderful. But they are for women only.
Okay. I'm sure there's got to be something out there for men. We'll figure that out.
I'm sure there are, but it's really nice to have the support, and you know, we're in a city where there's support. So thank you so much, Stacy, and again, thank you, Hadassah and the JCA, for sponsoring this. This is National Diabetes Month, and we're so glad that you were able to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.